time to ask the question all of us anime fans must ask. Which of our favorite cartoons from the Far East will Hollywood turn into a soulless franchise next? Cue title scene. Before we get started, let me make something incredibly clear. I am not saying it is a good idea for Hollywood to take these things and make them into big mainstream American movies. I am simply saying that these are the anime that I feel Hollywood at some point is going to look at for making into a big Hollywood movie. With an American Akira remake at some point happening and a Ghost in the Shell film going into pre-production, if those things can make money, we're going to see more of this, as well as this era of Hollywood turning everything possible into a franchise. This is something that they're going to look at sooner or later, whether it's tomorrow or a year from now. I don't know, I just thought I'd present the ones that I think are most likely we could see get turned into some form of a Hollywood movie. You ever noticed it feels like every year we get a movie that tries to just emulate 80s action movies? Well, Black Lagoon is the ultimate emulation of 80s action movies. For those of you who don't know, it's one of my favorite animes ever made. It's the only 10 out of 10 I've given since I've been reviewing anime. I love this series, and a lot of other people did, so it kind of gives a good incentive. It also gives a framework to go for. Where the 80s action movie knockoffs have failed because they're not sure what elements to take from and what need to get held back, Black Lagoon proved what can work and what can't work. Because of this, it would be really easy for a studio to use that as a framework for where to go with a first film, maybe a second film, and a third film. And with how intelligent and very smartly everything does in the series, it's totally possible you could jam out a couple of these and just with each one bring in that next level of intelligence like the series did. I'm not saying that it's a great idea for a movie, and there would be a lot of stuff that might not American audiences go out with, i.e. huge amounts of cursing and not getting the amount of audience you need. But hey, who doesn't love some guns? Talked about Eureka 7. I'm not as high on it as some other people are, but I do see the potential for something with it. My biggest problem with the series, without going into much of it, was that it felt a lot longer than it needed to be, and I actually think you could do this more in a movie. I think it would also be a really cool idea for a movie. Pacific Rim wasn't a huge hit in this country, but we do know that when done right, American audiences can react to robots and really out their ideas when presented through a good message. And the best part about Eureka 7 is at its core, it really is just sort of this coming-of-age little love story. Again, you don't need to include the endless bajiggle of characters this show had, but you really can use that to keep everything logical and straightforward. The main character, whose name escapes me, is very good for presenting stuff, because since he's so much just like a regular kid, it's just really easy to present everything through those eyes that a lot of Americans at any age will be able to connect with, and I think that would work great. Plus, I'd love to see what a good animation CGI company could do with some of those wacky robot designs. There had to be a shonen on here sooner or later. Inuyasha, we all know we love it. Even if you say you hate it, it came out long ago that I'm pretty certain for most people was one of their first major animes they followed, myself included, and yeah, one can make the argument it's very similar to the Twilight story. The girl who finds the guy who's a random other creature and everything's being fought around her and for her, it's for her perspective, but the guy does most of the fighting until she finally gets strong enough to do it herself, blah blah blah. Yeah, we've seen it before, but that's also a good incentive for Hollywood directors. They know this story works. They know people go out to see it. The reason the past couple of times since Twilight it hasn't been doing well is because there's nothing new you can add to it. With Inuyasha, you could have a very nice style going on there. You can have, again, really cool action that we haven't really seen yet. You can include martial arts. You can include the big CGI epic type stuff. And if you get in a pretty nice cast, you have a pretty good rotating roster of well-developed characters, which Twilight didn't have. And again, hey, at least the main girl isn't annoying. I've got another confession to make. Naruto just ending, it begs the question, No, 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 not that. The real question, how do we milk more money of this? How? Make it into a big movie, baby. For those of you who don't know, to me, Naruto is a lot like Harry Potter. You got a world that's all based around one type of human being. You got a chosen one main character. You have a lot of world building. You have a lot of characters. You have villains who don't show up towards the end. And there is a lot of mythology and source material there to get from. What this also has the advantage, unlike Inuyasha, it's not a cookie-cutter love story. Even though, yeah, there's a romance, and trust me, one day I'll have my thoughts on how that ended. The thing is that you have more room to do more interesting things. For me, with Naruto, I just love being in that world. The amazement of the ninja world, you have a clear path for a franchise to go, and they're characters that would probably attract kids for the comedy, as well as adults for, the heart and soul of everything. Speaking of simple stories, Blue Exorcist. I think this one would work as a big Hollywood movie, namely because as crazy as the plot is, it is kept fairly generic, i.e. Rin not being that interesting. But the problem this one would have is the religious element of it. He's son of Satan, Jesus Christ, all that stuff. The reason this is higher than the other stuff, though, that's going to attract a certain crowd of people. If you could do this movie cheap enough and keep everything within a fair amount of budget, I think you would get in that huge, like, Hot Topic type crowd. I think you would attract a pretty large audience with it. Not only that, the series does present everything in a way that doesn't really come off as offensive, and it would just be cool, and again, brings in those teen dollars. The reason I've been going with recent stuff is because if Hollywood's going to do a big anime movie, they're going to do it with things that have recent built-in fan bases. And even though Tokyo Ghoul, it's a little too soon to tell how it's going to last long as time goes on, it's still a fascinating, my second favorite anime of the year. There's a lot you can do with it. There's a lot to do with discrimination, a lot to do with hatred. You can really do a lot with it. And more importantly, you can do it in a way that's intelligent because of how the series builds its characters. Now, true, in a movie, you don't have that slow burn the show took advantage of to develop everything, but it looks like there's enough there, and hell, maybe you could even take it one step further. You could maybe even make this a rated R horror flick. Then you're really going to bring in the anime crowd who like this show, because now they won't have the stigma of, oh, it's just being made for the regular crowd. If you get that good word of mouth going, get a good cast in there, which you can do because there's a lot of varying ages of the characters, you can really get people interested and invested in this movie. You market it as a horror movie, you're going to attract two very loyal audience bases right there. You could really do something interesting, exciting, and you'll make people puke in their popcorn bags. This is the Michael Bay movie I want. Gurren Lagann doesn't resonate with me all that much, but the thing is there's a lot there for a big budget, big summer box office spectacle. You could make this huge, fun, exciting movie with a source material and a storyline that's straightforward, it's simple, and it is to the point. It's mankind getting up and kicking some major ass. You get a couple hot people in there to play our leads. You bring in someone who just knows how to make an explosion work, do all this and that, and screenwriters who have enough respect to give the characters some level of personality. You'll make something really badass, really fun to watch, and something you'll probably get everyone saying, I want those toys! Thank God they're not the typical Transformers crap. I don't want this movie. Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, the second one they did, is my favorite TV show of all time. I think it's amazing, beautiful, awesome, action-packed. I know a lot of other people think that, and it truly takes advantage of the television format, I think better than any show ever has in the history of forever. That's going to make Hollywood want to do a big budget movie on it. Honestly, I think it's crazy we haven't heard about one yet. The thing is, you already get that huge fan base. It has a lot of good word of mouth, great critic reviews. You could get in an American cast and it won't be a problem. You don't have to do race changes. The only problem I guess maybe you'll have is how do you do Ed's automail and stuff just because, how do you make that still look practical in a steampunk way? But other than that, I know Hollywood would want to do something with this because it does have a built-in franchise. It's very obvious to go with 2 or 3 movies, and then you can be done with it. There won't be a demand for anything else. You can just finish it there, maybe do what they're doing with Harry Potter and continue the world. But it's just something that I think they're going to do because they know they can make a lot of money with it because it is just so good. But that may not work in a movie, but that's never stopped Hollywood before. Japan's already making a movie about this, but I think realistically, if Hollywood wants to do it, they'll just make their own. Attack on Titan is definitely cinematic. It's definitely huge, and I definitely think that would work as a movie. In fact, it might even work better as a TV show because you don't need to try and make people think Eren is interesting. You could make a 2-hour film of this work, just do kind of like a war movie, kind of make Pacific Rim meets Lord of the Rings type deal. You got that fantasy world, you'll get that audience. Hell, Hobbit's ending soon, you can take advantage of that. You can sell a lot of merchandise with it. You can do a lot of this and that, this and that. There is a very interesting world to build upon. There are characters who you can make work in a film. Yeah, that is it. Hollywood's probably doing it now. On to number 1. I hate Sword Art Online. I can't stand it. Season 2, I'll worry about that later, but just to sum it up, I think it's boring and dull. Season 1 is horrendous. But it has a huge fan base. It has a loyal fan base. And remember when I brought up Twilight? I'm convinced Sword Art Online is the Twilight for penises. That's all it is. It's just attracting the male nerd audience. And if you can bring in that big an audience just with a subpar mess, imagine what you can do when you do that big Hollywood movie. You get all the big stops. You got action, you got the writing, you got all that. And apart from that, I think Sword Art Online would work better as a movie than it did as a TV show. The problem was that you had an interesting idea. There was never one thing they brought up in Sword Art Online that I didn't think could work. It was the execution. It was the fact that they had to drag everything out over 12 to 13 episode arcs, and it just didn't work because the characters weren't interesting because they weren't fleshed out enough, and the story wasn't that interesting because after a while it just became cookie cutter. And the thing is that with a movie, you have to shape the characters and make them work different. You can make a personalityless idiot like Kazuto work because in a film, in a story like that, you're mostly focusing on his issues, and him being the everyday man and simple would work. You can cut out a lot of things like the Yui character, the sister, all that, the incest, all that can go. Bear it down to the basic story and just put everything where it needs to go in a 2-hour format. You got a 4-film franchise built in. You have a huge core audience. But do you think any of this will ever happen? In the comment section below, give me the animes that you either agreed with that could be made into a movie or things that I may have missed. Bear in mind, I haven't seen everything that's came out, and I wanted to keep this to more recent things that have obviously stronger fan base for Hollywood to look at. But if there's something you'd like to see made into a movie or that you think could be made into a movie, include that in below. And as always, click to like and click to subscribe because if these movies ever happen, you know I'll be here to make fun of them.